All right, thanks everyone, and welcome to tonight's Planning and Consultation Committee meeting, 9th of August 2022. So members of the public are advised that the meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the live stream recording will be made publicly available on YouTube and Council's website. So I'd just like to read our Acknowledgement of Country. Nillumbik Shire Council respectfully acknowledges the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional owners of the country on which Nillumbik is located, and we value the significance of the Wurundjeri people's history as essential to the unique character of the Shire. We pay tribute to all First Nations people living in Nillumbik, give respect to elders past, present and future, and extend that respect to all First Nations people. We respect the enduring strength of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and acknowledge the ongoing matters of impacts of past trauma and injustices from European invasion, massacres and genocide committed against First Nations people. We acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people hold a deep and ongoing connection to this place. We value the distinctive place of our First Nation people in both Nillumbik and Australia's identity, from their cultural heritage and care of the land and waterways to their ongoing contributions in many fields, including academia, agriculture, art, economics, law and politics. There's no apologies, all councillors are present. Does any councillor have a disclosure of conflicts of interest? Nope. So we've only got one matter tonight. Actually, before we go there, we have to approve the minutes, do the minutes. So looking for a motion. Thanks, Councillor Regan. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Payne. Any discussion on the minutes? All right, so we'll vote that the committee acting under delegation confirms the minutes of the last meeting on Tuesday, 12th of July 2022. So all in favour? It's unanimous, or carried unanimously. So the first and only item tonight is PCC 28-22. It's construction of a second dwelling, in brackets double storey, to the rear of the existing dwelling at number 2 Cohen Avenue, Eltham. We've got a number of speakers tonight. We've got, if everyone's here, we've got 9 listed, and they'll come in the order of which, you'll be called up in the order of which they were received. So the first speaker for 3 minutes is John Alexander, and he's speaking, is it on the permit applicant on behalf of the owners? So John Alexander, Madison and Company. Thanks, John.
Thanks for tonight. I'm just here to represent the my clients at 2 Cohen Avenue. We have, as we've seen, we've had a proposal. We've been in coordination with council regarding this development. We've gone to advertising twice, and we've also complied with all of relevant Nillumbik planning, as well as clause 55 of Victoria's Res Code. We've had some comments regarding traffic regarding the proposed development. In regards to the traffic, there's an existing crossover that is currently active. It's being used at least twice a day. The impact of an additional dwelling on this crossover isn't going to impact the street. We've had comments on the location of the crossover, but being existing, it's an existing crossover and it's already being used. A lot of the concerns are traffic related, and a lot of the comments feel that it's because of the speed of cars coming down the hill of Cohen Avenue. The issue we have with that is that's out of our control. Our development that we're proposing won't impact any traffic speeds from neighbours. That's out of our control. In regards to the design, we have lessened the bulk. We're also we're cutting a fair bit out of the block, which means we're not actually sitting at natural ground level. So we've actually reduced our overall wall heights, the overall bulk form of the dwelling, to reduce it so it's not impacting on neighbouring properties. We've also got a lot of passive surveillance, which is over the nature reserve next door. This was actually not our request. This was actually a council planning request, and we've conceded and we've gone with their request. We feel, even though there's not a lot of unit developments in the vicinity, we're feeling it's the times are changing, and what we're proposing is fully compliant with everything that's needed. It's not going to impact the street. It's actually going to benefit the street. We're providing full new landscaping, no massive fences. All paling fences will be non-visible from the street, from the reserve, and we feel we're delivering quite a nice project for the area. And speaking from a resident in the area, I actually would benefit. I think the area would benefit from a few more developments like this. Times are changing, and the area's unfortunately changing to go with the times. So we're hoping we can get it through, and we'll see how we go.
Okay, thanks, John. Just stay there for a second.
Yep.
I'll just give the opportunity to any councillors to ask you
Yep.
a question, given
Sorry.
you are the applicant.
This is my first time
he's
doing
the
this,
applicant.
actually.
So John's the applicant. I'm letting
Yep.
people ask the applicant questions. Any councillors wishing to ask a question? Councillor Egan.
Yeah, just a quick one. It was just to clarify whether you were the owner or the planner or the
I'm the
builder.
designer for Madison Co.
Right, okay, thanks.
So you are the applicant?
I am the applicant, yes.
Yep. Yep. Mary?
Thanks for coming in. I'd just like to understand what you mean by passive surveillance. What does
Passive
look like?
surveillance is allowing the people on the property to view adjacent properties. So, for example, there's a passive surveillance clause coming in with the new building regs where you've got to have clear glazing so you can actually, it's more a security for people on site in regards to passive surveillance. And the passive surveillance can also take away a bit of the bulk from the built form, but also allows a little bit more security for the residents on the dwelling as well. So you're not completely contained within obscure glass and windows.
So just one quick question from me, John. Just the timelines of this process. Like, when did you submit the application, and what was the process before you submitted the application?
We submitted this application. I think it would probably be start of the year. I'm not actually sure. It's been a long, drawn-out process, and we applied pretty much and worked with Nillumbik's planning department. We went to advertising. There was objections. We went back, revised the design, and went back to advertising again. So we've had to pay 2 lots of advertising fees, and we've now in the situation where we have this. We have sat down and had a public consultation, which didn't get us anywhere, and we've now come to this meeting.
So, John, did the number of objections decrease the second time around?
I'm not 100% sure. I think they were about the same numbers.
Right.
And the concerns were pretty much the same as they were prior to the redesign of the dwelling.
So what was the difference between the two designs?
We made it more neighbourhood effective. We've removed the bulk of parapet walls and a flat roof, and we've engaged large eaves with a pitched roof and made it sympathetic to the street line, along with the other dwellings that have got eaves and pitched roofs.
Right. No other questions, councillors? Councillor Egan, then Councillor Duffy.
Can you tell me whether you're aware of any other properties around where you want to do it of 2-storied houses?
There's plenty of 2-storey dwellings in the area. There's no unit developments, but there is plenty of 2-storey developments.
And no other properties with 2 houses on?
No, there's not.
Right, thanks.
Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, John, for coming in. Just 2 questions. One, you just mentioned that you live in the area, so that's great to know that you're local as well. So thank you for being local and also working to, having a job to help in our neighbourhood. The other question is related to some of the things that I've read in the points that have come through to us from the application and the planning details that went with that, and some of the objections that have come through. One of them was said that the majority of trees were moved in 2021. Now, I just heard that you said that the application was put forward at the beginning of the year. So were you aware that there were trees on the property that were removed before the designs and the drawings were put through?
Yes, the trees were removed in accordance with the planning scheme. There's no overlays regarding landscape on the actual property. My clients did consult with council regarding the removal of the trees, and were advised they could remove the trees because there's no overlay regarding landscape.
And so do you know if permits were required for the removal of those trees?
No, they weren't, because there was no significant landscape overlay on the property.
Okay, thank you.
John, this is not an accusation. I honestly don't know the answer, but there was a tree in the nature strip. Do you know what happened to that? Was that
No,
removed?
I'm not sure what's happened with the tree on the nature strip.
Yep. Okay.
That was before my time.
Do you think it might have been council that removed it or somebody else?
I don't know. The feature survey that was provided didn't have the tree on the survey.
Does any officer know if council removed that tree or somebody else? Rosa?
Through the chair. We've done an officer site inspection. The street trees are there. Not that one. Not
Cohen Avenue.
Not one more.
On Cohen Avenue, the nature strip on Cohen Avenue. It's gone. If you look at Google Maps, it's still there.
It is represented in it is represented in part of the plans, the tree, and that one has been removed on the nature strip on Cohen Avenue.
Yeah, I suppose the query is, there's an accusation that somebody's removed a tree apart from council. I think it could easily have been council.
Unfortunately, my scope of works is within the allotment boundaries. I don't control what's outside the allotment boundaries.
So our plans correlate with the street view, and the plans indicate that there's a tree on Cohen Avenue. The street view currently shows a tree there.
There's no tree. There's definitely no tree. The cars parked there constantly, there's no tree.
If somebody from the gallery is speaking later on, you might want to address that if you have some further information. But my thing was, it's a council tree. Did council remove that tree or did somebody else? I honestly don't know. But thanks, John.
I don't know the history of the street tree, but if need be, if there's a street tree being removed prior to my engagement and my client's removed it and hasn't asked council permission, well, surely they should be expected to reinstate it.
All right. If there's no other questions, John, well, thank you for your time. And I've got another John next.
Thank you.
It's John Facondo. John. So, John, you're listed as twice. The first time you're speaking on behalf of yourself. We all have the opportunity to ask you questions. And then after that 3 minutes, or after we've asked those questions, you'll speak on behalf of Ken Titman. And we won't be able to ask you any questions because you speak on behalf of Ken. So, if you want to start as you.
Thanks, Councillor Perkins. Well, thanks, councillors, for the opportunity to speak to this committee about this application. We've lived in our house in Cohen Avenue for 23 years and absolutely love the environment, the local environment. The street is full of open, detached houses with lots of space all around them. It's a lovely atmosphere and the camaraderie amongst the neighbourhood is fantastic. I stress that I support appropriate development that is in harmony with our natural environment. But in my view, this proposal does not fit in with our local neighbourhood character. It's cramming a large two-storey house behind an existing single-storey house. And it's just against everything we love about living in Eltham. I summarise my concerns I put in my submission, including neighbourhood character, road safety, privacy for adjoining park users and our neighbours, visual impacts from our place, loss of vegetation, impacts on local fauna, and a precedent for further development. What I would like to concentrate is respond to some of the points that have been raised in the planner's assessment. Point number 23, the site is actually located at least 3 kilometres from via main road to Eltham Post Office, not the 1.9 k's. And this sort of development is much more appropriate closer to the Eltham Major Activity Centre. Point 30, neighbourhood character in the Nillumbik planning scheme. It's a garden court GC5 precinct and the strategies include design buildings to respect the single-storey character of the streetscape where that is the dominant feature. There are only 4 properties in Cohen Avenue of 2-storey and a couple of them go down with the slope of the land, so they're not actually obvious 2-storey properties. And the other quote is generally open field. So given those guidelines, I'd suggest that's not in keeping with the character of this area, according to the Garden Court Precinct strategy. Point 56, the Infrastructure Department quote said the Centre Island is not a pedestrian crossing. In actual fact, it is a pedestrian crossing. There's a sign right on the corner of Cohen Avenue and Land Drive. It says Refuge Island with a picture of a mother and a child. And so that's a concern that I don't know if they've actually come and actually have a look at the site. With the Refuge Island, the issue is where will cars park along Leanne Drive, adjoining that property, if there are people visiting, for example. Because we've got the Refuge Island in the middle, it works very well, slowing down traffic. I haven't got any concrete data, but since we've had the lights installed on the corner of Leanne Drive and Main Road, there's been a lot more traffic coming down. So there are 25 objections to this application. I think that reflects the level of concern in our local area about this proposal.
Thanks, John. You're out of time, but we'll have the opportunity to ask you some questions. I might just throw to officers first, Rosa. Do we have the 1.9 kilometres versus 3? Is that as the crow flies 1.9, or was that a mistake? So it's as the crow flies, John?
Sorry, what's that?
It's as the crow flies? That's how...
As the crow flies?
Yeah, so you need to be a crow.
Okay.
But yeah, but that's...
But still, realistically, it's a fair distance from...
Yeah, but in terms of the if you want to speak to it, Rosa, in terms of the planning matters, it's...
So in terms of warehousing can be... No, you sit there. I'll come around here. Through the chair. So in terms of where housing occurs in the Shire, you're right in that the majority of the housing should occur closest to the activity centre and close to public transport. But the zones in the planning scheme do allow for development to occur. That has to be assessed on its merits, and we have to determine whether it's appropriate to allow it based on a number of different factors, not just the proximity to an activity centre, but is it close to a bus stop? Is it close to other forms of, transport to get to where you need to get to? And in addition to that, we then factor in neighbourhood character and all that type of consideration.
Okay, thanks, Rosa. But that's my point. The neighbourhood character, it's all open properties around there. We haven't got tightly crammed buildings in a small, I think it's 800 square metres, is it? The block of land. None of the other properties nearby are crammed in like that.
There are a couple of developments that do have development.
That's further up the hill, and that was an empty, the 2-storey units up in further up Leanne Drive, but that was on an
John,
empty...
we can't have a debate between yourself and the
Okay.
Director of Planning.
All right.
Well, thanks, Rosa. Councillor Egan.
Thank you, John. Excuse my voice. Can you tell me where you are in relation to number 2?
We're number 3, Cohen Avenue.
So you're across the road.
Diagonally across.
So you're in the big long one on the corner? Or
No,
the next
next door, 2-storey.
one? Right, okay, thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Eyre.
Yes, can you tell me what it's like exiting Kerwin Avenue, please?
Sorry, what's that?
Can you tell me what it's like for you to exit Kerwin
Yeah, it's
Avenue
very-
with that refuge island in there as well?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, it's actually quite challenging because there's a curve coming, the traffic coming around on Leanne Drive. It's quite a dangerous exit from Cohen Avenue as it is. And that's my concern because you've got traffic coming around. And if we've got traffic, cars parked on the left-hand side of Leanne Drive, it blocks the view of the traffic coming down Leanne Drive from Main Road. It's actually quite a challenging exercise as it is. And I think this development will exacerbate that problem.
Thank you.
Just a question for the officers. I'm not sure if anyone's here to be able to answer it, but just this clarification around pedestrian crossing Refuge Island. Are they one and the same thing? Are they? How do we explain the sign if it's not a crossing?
Use mine.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Through the chair. It's difficult for me to show you without pointing to a map. Yeah. So, I'm going to show you guys. Ooh. This is Leanne Drive, and here's the I don't know if you can all see, but I'll just come across so you can all see. The pedestrian refuge is there. Yep. The subject dwelling is down here. Yep. So it's not this one, which is directly opposite the
there are markings north of the actual concrete refuge that traffic would have to cross to get into the property.
Any other questions of John? Councillor Duffy.
Thank you. Hi, John. And I note that you said that you've lived in the street for, was it 26 years?
22.
23. So
yeah.
thank you for what you've done in the neighbourhood in that time. My comment is about the safety concerns that you've raised with the pedestrian traffic island of refuge, because I know that you are the president of the school council at St Helena Secondary College. So not that you haven't put that in your application, I know that you haven't stated that, but I know that that's something that's on your mind when you're talking about
And the question,
safety.
Councillor Duffy.
Well, my question is, you know, in the area, have you noticed many children walking through the streets that you're applying this safety component to?
Absolutely. There's a lot of kids in that area, not just at St Helena Secondary College, but also at Eltham North Primary School. There's a lot of kids and a lot of people walking their dogs, including myself. I do it daily. I go through that pedestrian crossing every day. And like I said, there's a lot of traffic coming down Land Drive. Sometimes it flies around that corner up the top end, and it's useful to have that central refuge to stand and wait for the traffic to go through. Yeah, absolutely. Kids and adults and dogs.
Thanks, John. If there's no more questions, Councillor, I'll let John finish and back to you, John, because you're now speaking on behalf of Ken.
Ken Tipman?
Yep.
Is that right? Where do you want me to start now? Good evening, Lady Mayor, councillors and staff. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. My name is Ken Tipman. My wife and I lived at 7 Cohen Avenue in the house that we built 36 years ago. Living in the Eltham area, which I knew well, is not done by accident. It is a definite choice that one makes based upon the environment and surrounds, along with the belief that we would be able to maintain that way of life that we envisaged. I remember well early on planting 34 rose bushes. I stood back and thought, this is good, this will work. Fast forward 4 to 5 years and our children are growing up and there are more neighbours settled in the street with more of the process of building. Some families left over the years and new ones have moved in, settled into this community that we've created, and it's always an easy thing to do. With every new arrival came new friends. There existed a true spirit in the street with a genuine respect shown for each other. This spirit was no more evident during the early days of COVID. One of our residents made arrangements for a coffee truck to call in every Wednesday morning. Every person at home during those months would come in for 30 minutes or so and have a coffee and share their time with the neighbours. Things have changed in January with the posting of an advertising board outside 2 Cohen Avenue. We were not forewarned or consulted in any way, so this was a total surprise to all. We respect the rights of that resident to apply for a planning permit. By the same token, it was the right of concerned parties to lodge objections to the proposal, and fully expected the owner to respect our rights to do so. We watched on as this process has taken its toll on the neighbours who live adjacent to the property in question. I was asked by somebody, why does this affect us at number 7? My response was simply that it is like family. Where it affects others, it adversely affects us and always will. The most surprising development of this long process occurred on May 30 at a planning meeting convened by Craig Smith. This was supposed to bring the opposing parties together in a cordial atmosphere and views which would be exchanged. The owner seemed to take exception to the view of others and stated that they, meaning the objectors of which there are 25, can either get up with the times in Eltham or move on somewhere else. This was a slap in the face for those that had befriended the owner and his wife. Where had they expected respect, they got contempt. There it was, at one moment in time, where it was laid bare for all to see, the realisation that the expectations of one owner should outweigh the wishes of many residents who have spent years building an existence in an area that we cherish and guard jealously. Well, that's the way it all appears to us in Cohen Avenue. This leads me to the question, to all present, when confronted with this situation, what would you do? Would you fight to protect what you've built up, and do you believe in the greater good? The residents of Cohen Avenue and surrounds certainly do.
Thanks very much, John. Thanks for your time. And thanks for presenting on behalf of Ken.
Thank you.
Next on the list is Joanne Facondo. Thanks, Joanne.
Okay. Good evening, councillors. My name is Joanne Facondo and I'm a third generation Eltham resident. I'm speaking to you tonight to put forth my objections to the planning application to build a second dwelling at 2 Cohen Avenue. I've lived in Eltham for 29 years, 23 of which have been in Cohen Avenue. Eltham has changed over that time with ever-increasing development, which has both been appropriate, reflecting Eltham's character, and some not so appropriate. However, little has changed in our street over the time I have lived there, including the residents. We like where we live. It's a street where neighbours have become good friends, a true sense of community. Like I said, I'm here tonight to object to the proposed additional development of 2 Cohen Avenue. This proposed development is not in keeping with the street character and the place I call home. We are not in inner suburbia where houses take up all of the residential block with little or no backyard. If I wanted to live in a place like that, I would live in Northcote or Fitzroy. I believe there is a lack of understanding and consideration towards open space, vegetation and landscaping with this proposed development. There has already been considerable loss of vegetation on the property over the past 2 years, including the removal of a council nature strip tree at the front of the property. There is barely a mature tree left. With the building of a second dwelling, I believe what vegetation remains will go irrespective of what is shown on the plans. This is not the Eltham I love. I'm also concerned for our wildlife that we are so lucky to have in our neighbourhood: echidnas, lizards, possums and an amazing bird life, all of which makes Eltham unique and a place I am proud to live in. Traffic management is also another issue that causes me a great deal of concern. There is currently a pedestrian refuge which is clearly signed, as well as a traffic island adjacent to the proposed driveway. The proposed driveway is also at the dip in the valley of the hill in Leanne Drive and opposite Long Valley Way, a traffic accident waiting to happen as owners' cars enter and exit the development. It's dangerous due to the speed in which cars go up and down Leanne Drive. Any additional parked cars outside the proposed development will cause a traffic management problem, as cars turning either left or right out of Cohen Avenue have extremely poor visibility now. It will be worse if cars are parked on both sides of the street. Cohen Avenue is not in a position to have additional cars parked in the street. There is no space, nor is Long Valley Way suitable. There is no other development like this in our immediate neighbourhood, and I do not want this proposed development to be the first and to set a precedent. This proposed development cannot and should not go ahead. Therefore, as elected councillors, I seek your support to vote against the proposed development of a second dwelling at 2 Cohen Avenue. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. Spot on for time. Any councillor have a question of Joanne? No? Thanks very much, Joanne.
Thank you.
Next on the list we have Emma Sampson. If you're here, Emma.
Good to go? Yeah. I just wanted to say thank you for giving us the chance to speak. My name is Emma Sampson. I live at number 1 Cohen Avenue, so opposite number 2. I moved to Eltham in 2015 from Greensborough, where I grew up with my husband. We intentionally selected Eltham as a place we wanted to raise our family due to the trees and gorgeous surroundings. Greensborough was a place where we felt more and more houses were being built, and it was moving away from the sort of place we wanted to live when raising our family. We moved to Eltham to be a part of the environment, to celebrate it and not to destroy it. We wanted to be around the people and the families that lived in the area and to celebrate the way that Eltham respects its natural environment. We wanted to feel that we lived privately and not too close to the houses around us, but still in a suburban area. We wanted to live here as there were blocks with individual houses and backyards. It is this quality that attracts us and other families to live here and therefore develops a family community that we love. Understandably, development has to happen. However, our particular area of Eltham is not one of high density living. The houses are all very open, have no front fences, are surrounded by lots of trees, and are not boxy, have decent front and backyards, and they all tailor really nicely to the natural environment around them. I don't believe that the proposed dwelling fits in with the character of Eltham. Further to this, where the proposed property will have its driveways at the base of hills in both directions, a crossing and median strip were recently put there to combat the speed at which cars travel. I believe that adding a working driveway to this area is adding unnecessary risk to an already very dangerous part of the road. I've got young children who will in future be using the area to cross when walking to school, and I want it to be as safe as possible. Turning left out of Cohen Avenue onto Leanne Drive is already really dangerous as it's a blind corner. I can't count the number of times I've turned out only to see a car flying towards me from the Nathan Road end of Leanne Drive. And if we add another driveway, this will just be an additional factor that I believe adds to an already really unsafe area. Parking, as said before, will also be a really huge issue. It's not safe to park on Leanne Drive, therefore there'll be additional cars parking in either Kerwin or Long Valley Way, both of which already have lots of cars due to the families living there. I don't want Eltham to become a place where multiple houses are squeezed onto blocks with no backyards and stare into the houses around them. This is not what people move to Eltham for. They move here to be within the green wedge with space and natural surroundings. I simply want Eltham to remain a place where people respect and celebrate the natural environment around them. I don't want to set the precedent for subdivision in the area that I love, as in doing this we damage parts of the natural environment that should be appreciated and completely change the character of our home. And I've got 20 seconds left, so I just wanted to add in respect to that, the nature strip tree that is there. When we built our garage, the owner of number 2 asked our excavator to remove that tree for them. I don't know if the excavator actually did remove it, but the question was asked. That's it.
All right, thanks, Emma. Appreciate your presentation. Any questions of Emma? No? Thanks very much, Emma. Next on the list we have Stephen Guest. If you're here, Stephen. Is it Stefan? No, it's Stefan. Stephen? Stefan, sorry, Stefan.
Oh, Stephen's right. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. My wife and I have lived in 4 Cohen Avenue for over 22 years. We moved specifically because of the feeling of open space and green surroundings that Eltham offers. We bought specifically in Cohen Avenue because of the outlook of the property onto the reserve, and because from our backyard it was open space and greenery in all directions. Adding a second dwelling onto Cohen Avenue will change that outlook significantly, and I argue is not in character with the surrounding homes. Point 28 of the Planning Officer's report states that the surrounding area can be characterised by detached dwellings with open and well-landscaped front yards. What it fails to identify is that the other notable characteristic of the dwellings in our area is that they have large backyards, a characteristic that neither of the proposed dwellings will have, making these dwellings not consistent with the character of the neighbourhood. Point 32 and 33 make reference to the setback of the dwellings, but only makes reference to the street setback. What about considering the setback from the reserve? The report indicates that the new dwelling is only 3.2 metres from the reserve fence, with no existing house on the north side of the reserve that close. This is another example of why the proposed dwellings are not consistent with the character of the neighbourhood, irrespective of passive surveillance. Point 22 states that the proposal makes a positive contribution to the supply and diversity of housing in the municipality. According to the figures in the Nillumbik housing strategy, 89.6% of homes in Nillumbik have 3 bedrooms or more already, and therefore I cannot see how the building of an additional large multi-bedroom house is adding diversity of housing. Point 23 states that the site is located a moderate distance from the Eltham Activity Centre and train station. This location is considered policy neutral for a dual occupancy development. It is, however, my understanding that the precinct immediately across the road in Long Valley Way, which is closer to Eltham, is covered by a covenant that prevents the block in this pocket from being subdivided. If this area is protected from subdivision and is closer to Eltham, it does not make sense to allow subdivision immediately across the road. Point 41 states all 6 of the small trees on site have a low retention value. Low value to whom? Certainly not to us. These trees offer the greenery we expect from Eltham, as well as provide a level of privacy, both of which will be lost if they are removed. Point 42 states that the site is currently devoid of any substantial canopy trees. So with no substantial trees on the site and the removal of the majority of the low retention trees, it is likely to be a significant period of time before the sort of greenery that Eltham is valued for is reinstated. That may not even be possible along the boundary fence with my house, 4 Cohen Avenue, as there is as little as 1.2 metres between the dwelling and the boundary fence at points. We do not want to lose the Eltham feel that we love, and we do not want the situation where empty nesters or mums and dads developers change the profile of our neighbourhood in search of financial gain, leaving those of us that see this as our home compromised as a result. We want to continue to be able to live in an open environment where the outlook from our home is of open space and greenery and not looking onto walls of adjacent dwellings, and I ask the council to reject the proposal for the second dwelling on 2 Cohen Avenue. I can add more insight into your question on the council tree if you wish, Councillor Perkins.
Thanks, Steph. I'll ask you a question about the tree then. Do you know anything about the council tree?
I do. I was in the front yard at the time when my neighbour in 2 Cohen Avenue, I can't quote this because I don't have that sort of memory, offered a slab to the excavator to knock that tree out and basically take all the other trees out of the front yard when he had a moment. The owner was not around when he did it, and I was still in the front yard because the excavator came across to me and he said, "Do you know if there's any taps anywhere in that bush? Because I'm about to take it out." This is on the front yard. So I don't know whether that was done with council permission or not. I'm not privy to that, but I do know that the excavator that was working in the street at the time came down the street and ripped that tree out.
So that's a tree on the nature strip, the council-owned tree.
The tree on the nature strip.
Yeah. How long ago did that happen?
I could not tell you exactly how long ago. Was when you were building.
Yeah. All right. There's probably not much we can do about the tree, but it's just important that if you see some illegal activity happening in Nillumbik, particularly if it's a council-owned tree and it's a council-owned tree, it needs to be reported. If it has been reported, it hasn't actioned on, perhaps we can look into that, but I wasn't aware that...
I accept that point, Councillor, that, possibly something that should be reported, but you look out for your neighbours at the time and you sort of... I didn't do it at the time.
No, but... Yeah, so this is where some of it could lead. But anyway, any other questions, councillors? Mayor Eyre.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in. So when you saw the tree being removed or knew of the tree being removed, were you aware at that time that a planning application was being submitted?
I was not aware of the time, and I think it would be prior to that submission, but I'm not sure of the timelines.
Okay, thank you.
What would have been the benefit to the applicant or, of removing the tree?
Parking on the nature strip.
Okay, thanks.
Parking in Cohen Avenue it's a narrow street. It's sort of only almost 2 lanes. They're family homes. Excuse me. Family homes, there's teenage children who have cars and other things. Many of the residents on the street, myself included at times, use your garage for storage of other bits and pieces, and you park your car in the driveway and other bits and pieces. So there is a challenge, and I know the neighbours have a similar situation that they often park on the street, not just in the garage, because they use the garage for other purposes.
So that nature street trip the nature strip tree that we're talking about, it was in front of number 2, or was it further up the road?
It was in front of number 2.
Okay, thank you.
But it's not really about the nature strip tree that this conversation is about. It's about the...
Correct.
The house.
You're right. Councillor Egan.
Yes, I just wanted to check, excuse me, are you in the house directly next door with the pool in the backyard?
Correct.
So at the moment you look directly into the existing house?
There are some very large trees that block the view into the backyard of that house, which are going to be taken down as part of the plans, which means we
look... Into the backyard of the house, right?
We look over the backyard of the house, yes.
Okay then, thank you.
Yeah, both our houses being set towards the front of the blocks.
Yep. Councillor Duffy, have you got a question? Okay. Councillor Eyre.
You have a swimming pool?
We do.
And can you talk to me about the impact and the shading of your backyard with the development?
Yeah, the shading that's been presented in the plans show that the backyard does have some shading at about 3 p.m. I'm far from a planning expert and everything. I did some calculations over the summer period when I was there, because the winter solstice or the summer solstice, or there's some particular conditions. It is my calculation, which would need to be validated by someone, but I got out there with sticks in the backyard to look at the casting of the shadow and indicate that in summer, which is when your pool is mostly unused, late in the day, which is when your pool is often used at the end of the day, a significant percentage of our pool will be shadowed by the dwelling. I wouldn't like to put particular figures on it because those figures are not, but it's well and truly significant on one end of our pool by the end of the day.
So with the plans, it shows shadowing, but your time that you're referring to is later than the...
I think the shadowing, if I can recall, is somewhere around September. They calculate the shadowing at some time around September, which is certainly a different time of the year, and the sun is in a different position. So I tried to do some equivalent calculations. I don't have all the data to do that, and tried to determine the distance that the shadow would be cast at other times of the year to understand what the implications were. And as you can see in the plans that it presented, it casts shadow on the pool up until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and then beyond. And in summer, it would appear to me to be significantly worse.
Thank you.
Councillor Duffy.
Thank you. Thank you for your very detailed submission too, Stephen. One of the things that you mentioned were the canopy trees, and you've just highlighted that there's the trees that are there at the moment kind of block the view. You also mentioned that there's a very small window of space that will be between your home and the new residence if it goes ahead and is built, and that there's not room to be able to plant trees. Two parts to the question. One is, have you noticed that there have already been trees removed in the backyard of the property? Because I've noticed people saying that in their submissions. And the second part to the question is, with canopy trees being of value to you, as you've mentioned, do you have room in your backyard to be able to plant trees to replace those that would be lost in the neighbouring property if that goes ahead?
We do have space in our yard to be able to plant trees, yes. There are no canopy trees, so I'm quoting from the planning report. There are no canopy trees, so I'm not privy to the true definitions of what those words are, but my understanding is that canopy tree is a larger tree, and according to the planning officer's report, there are no canopy trees on that property. So my point was, if you take away the lesser value trees, or I think the terminology was low retention value trees, which tend to be the smaller size trees, then you'll have no trees on that yard.
Yeah, and I suppose I'm kind of going back to your history as being a neighbour as well. Are you familiar with there being larger canopy trees in the backyard that were cut down before this planning process happened?
So in open and transparency, there were 2 very large canopy trees in both our backyard and our neighbour's backyard. Both trees died at a similar time, and they were both removed. And in not too distant time, those trees, for whatever reason, whether it's a drought-tolerant area, there was a very large canopy tree in the middle of that backyard, which was taken down, and there was one in the middle of our backyard a couple of years ago, which also was taken down.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. No other questions, councillors? Thanks very much, Stephen.
Thank you.
Next, we've got Elizabeth Guest.
Good evening, councillors. I'm Libby Guest. 22 years ago, Steve and I moved to 4 Cohen Avenue, where our 4 children were born and were raised. We love where we live because of the open space, the trees, the wildlife, the fresh air and the community. Most of the homes around us are single dwellings with front gardens and backyards, which provide a safe space for young children and pets to play, and for teenagers and young adults to relax and enjoy time with their friends. As a family, our backyard is a place to celebrate and embrace time with friends in the privacy of our own space, without other buildings in close proximity and overlooking. And this is why we moved here and continue to live here, to maintain our home and to invest in the community, schools and sporting clubs. Over the years, we've had the pleasure of watching possums, owls, kookaburras, lorikeets, rosellas, many other birds, blue-tongued lizards and the occasional kidna make their homes in the trees and gardens in our homes. In Cohen Avenue, we've worked together as a community and helped each other build gardens which attract this wildlife, and have maintained and planted trees that will enhance the natural environment. In turn, this assists in reversing the previous negative impact on our fragile planet, which we now more than ever need to consider. More buildings and hard surfaces and less trees in our neighbourhood should be intentionally avoided at this time. One of the things we love so much about our area is that our children go safely from house to house, playing in each other's backyards, shooting basketball hoops, jumping on trampolines, swimming in pools, playing with dogs, riding bikes and playing hide and seek. We cannot overlook how precious it is for our children to have this space to play, and we want to maintain this in homes in this area. Many families who moved here 30 plus years ago when the street was established still live here, and their children return now with their grandchildren. In one situation, the children are now raising their own families in the street, which I think is a testament to them wanting to experience living in a wonderful environment they grew up in. Having gardens, backyards, open space, fresh air, trees, birds and wildlife all around us is why we live here. It's why we invest our time, our money and our efforts in our surroundings. This overdevelopment would significantly adversely impact the area and sets a precedent which could see the other applications for subdivision, which would change the integral character of our area, where people seek to make a financial gain and not consider the long-term impact of development. We plan to live here for a long time to come. Who knows, maybe one day our children may be raising their children in Cohen Avenue. Regardless, we request that you reject this application for permit and help us to retain the reason we chose to live here and make this our home in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Libby. Any questions, councillors? Nope. Thanks, Libby.
Thank you.
Next we have Laurie Widdop, and then after Laurie's spoken and we've had an opportunity to perhaps ask Laurie questions, she's going to speak again on behalf of Hedley Widdop. So, Laurie, you're first.
Thank you.
I have lived in Eltham, close to Cohen Avenue, for almost 15 years. It is a unique and peaceful area, free of power lines, and is made up of single dwelling properties with large front and backyards. The houses are set back from the road a lot further than you find in other built areas, with this feature providing much needed habitat for the wildlife in the area. There are many mature trees, and since the area was originally developed, there has been a substantial recovery of vegetation, which has become a central feature of our neighbourhood character. Allowing this development creates a dangerous and disturbing precedent for further development. I object to the subdivision and redevelopment of 2 Cohen Avenue for many reasons. These include the location of the additional dwellings driveway. Traffic travels along this section of Leanne Drive at excessive speeds due to the topography. The inherent danger of having a driveway located at the lowest point of a local thoroughfare and so close to traffic islands that were installed to reduce traffic speed and for pedestrian safety will cause accidents. This is not an if, it is a when. Vegetation removal. Substantial vegetation removal has already occurred at 2 Cohen Avenue. The images from above on Google Maps are not recently taken and show a very healthy council tree on the front verge and substantial vegetation in the backyard. Views into the property's backyard were obscured by trees and vegetation. Now there are clear views into the open backyard. At a 2-storey property, close to both fence lines visible from Long Valley Way, and the character will not fit with what is currently in our neighbourhood. It will be very difficult to obscure the dwelling from the road, as any vegetation along the Leanne Drive verge is likely to further impede visibility for vehicles exiting this property, heightening the risk of traffic accidents. Parking issues. The proposed 4-bedroom, 2-car park dwelling will be located on a stretch of Leanne Drive that does not have access for safe street parking. Visitors to the property will have to find a place to park on Cohen Avenue, which is already stretched for parking and likely the reason for removing the council tree. Setting a precedence for further medium-density subdivisions in the area. If this subdivision, which is located a substantial distance from local shops and public transport, is approved, then this will be the beginning of the end for our neighbourhood character and biodiversity within the area. It will result in the removal of vegetation, the reduction of wildlife habitats and corridors, a marked increase of traffic on our local roads, and greater car parking issues throughout the area. And safety during extreme fire days. There are no overlays over this part of Eltham. However, the bushfire management overlay is within the urban growth boundary at the top of Leanne Drive near Parsons Road. The precedence of subdivision threatens to risk the lives of many locals if emergency evacuations cannot be done safely in the event of a local fire. There are thousands of residents in Eltham and limited exits to navigate a path to safety. Fire plans are a must for local residents. However, our changing climate sees that the best prepared people still get caught out. You just have to look at the recent fires across Europe. It paints a bleak picture for those of us living in one of the most fire-prone areas on the planet.
Thanks very much, Laurie. Any questions of Laurie? Councillor Duffy.
Thanks, Laurie. You've really highlighted neighbourhood character, as have other submitters tonight. One of the things that I'm really interested in is, did you know that Council has been going through a neighbourhood character study, and have you submitted to that so that you're able to put in your comments about what you see as your neighbourhood character and what you'd like to see the preferred neighbourhood character of your area be?
Yes, I have submitted.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Eyre.
As you live in Long Valley Way, I nearly said Long Galley Way, Long Valley Way, I'd like to understand what you see of pedestrians coming through the reserve, crossing Leanne Drive and Lean Drive and going down into Long Gully Way.
Long Valley.
Long Valley Way.
There is a lot. We do have a lot of pedestrians because a lot of people will cross from Long Valley Way into the reserve, into Leanne Drive Reserve, and they cut through to Artist Hill, and then from there they can go up onto the aqueduct. So we do have an area that is very much for pedestrians rather than going up hills either other direction. So I do find they do need that pedestrian crossing, because if you're even us in a car coming out of Long Valley Way, you kind of have to look, and you have to look again, because by the time you've looked one way and you've looked the other, there could be a car coming by the time you're about to go, because those cars are coming down. I know when council put in the pedestrian crossing, letters came out because there were objections to the pedestrian crossing being put in by a couple of residents, I think, but the letter that came to say it was going in was because the average speed of cars travelling through the area was over 60 k's an hour, and it's a 50 k zone, and that's mainly because of the topography. So it is quite dangerous.
Can you explain where the situation is of this pedestrian crossing on Lane Drive, please?
It's at the bottom of a hill, really. It's right down the bottom of the hill. So with two steep entrances coming down to it, really. So, and that's why a pedestrian crossing was needed, because council found that if a person was walking across, a car would end up coming so quickly that you'd end up with a pedestrian in the middle of the road and nowhere to go. So it's not a very wide road, but it's, I guess, the traffic coming at speed that just doesn't give people time to cross.
Thank you.
Now, Councillor Duffy.
Thanks. I've got one more question. And Laurie, I'm asking you because I haven't asked anybody else this question. It's kind of come to me while you've been talking. But it is about appropriate development, which is what a number of people have said that they're happy to see, appropriate development, and that they're indicating that this is a 2-storey, 3-bedroom development. Sorry, 4-bedroom development is not appropriate. Would you consider something else as being appropriate, like a 1-storey development, less bedrooms, or is this just, I don't know how else to ask the question, is there something that would be acceptable to you in terms of development at number 2 Cohen Avenue, or do you think that with the open space and the existing neighbourhood character of backyards, front yards, it should stay the way that it is?
I would like to see it stay the way it is. But like you say, development does happen. The issue I have is having a place with so many bedrooms. It's going to be an issue with parking. It's going to be an issue in a lot of ways on people who have lived in the area for a very long time and are happy to see it stay the same way. So I just really struggle with someone moving in and rules have been put in place about vegetation and putting vegetation back. Well, if they've got their own, they don't follow the rules already in that respect, then what's going to happen going forward? You know, things can be put in, you need to plant this, this, this. Is it going to be followed?
Thanks, Laurie. One question I might have of officers, just to clarify this sort of position. There's an assumption that people were not allowed to cut down trees on private land where there's no overlay that applies. Perhaps you can just speak to that, Rosa. And has the residents of 2 Cohen Avenue or any other resident in the area where there's not an overlay, are they allowed to cut their trees down?
Through the chair, where there's no overlay that requires a planning permit, people can. Where there is no overlay on the land that requires a permit for its removal, the tree can be removed.
Whether that tree be alive or dead?
whether that tree be alive or dead.
And how about the council-owned tree on the nature strip? Does that fall into a separate category because that's our tree,
So
not their tree?
That would need council consent to be removed, and I'm unsure whether a request was made to our asset team as to whether that was sought and received, but they wouldn't have needed a planning permit. They just need council consent.
So probably just to clarify in terms of, that's the difference about the trees. You cut the tree down on your own property, you don't need permission. You don't need planning permission because there's no overlay to protect that tree. If you want to cut down a tree on a neighbour's property, of course, you need permission from the neighbour, and that's the issue with the council tree that was removed. So that was, whoever removed that did that illegally. Whereas the existing vegetation, there's nothing to protect those trees because there's no overlay to protect the tree in that, or certainly on this property.
Which is a bit disappointing in a green wedge.
Well, it is, but there's many areas without overlays in the green wedge in Nillumbik. That's why we're going through the neighbourhood character study at the moment to try to get people who really want to keep that vegetation, get them to submit to the neighbourhood character study, and hopefully that will then lead to possibly overlays into the future. But as it stands at the moment, there is no overlay in your part of the world to protect the vegetation. Same goes for a lot of the urban parts of Nillumbik, unfortunately. Oh, Councillor Ramcharan has a question.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Just through the chair, Rosa. So the discussion we've just had regarding the removal of trees when there's no overlay, it's my understanding that that's correct, that they can't be removed. However, we do have a proposed local law that would prohibit the removal of trees above a certain circumference. I was just wondering if that will change that, at least for some trees, once the local laws are endorsed.
Through the chair, yes, Councillor Ramcharan, you are correct. There is a proposed local law that would require residents to seek a local law permit before removing any trees on private land. So yeah, that's in train. It's not in place as yet.
Thanks, Rosa.
I've got a question through the chair. Do we get many requests to remove nature strip trees?
Through the chair, I'm not 100% sure on that answer. I'm sure we do get requests, but I'm just unsure as to the criteria that they would meet to have that removed.
And putting in trees and supporting them to be strong and healthy and grow is not only an expense to council, but it also helps with our tree canopy and keep our environment. I would maybe I'm not able to ask this question, but I would assume that officers wouldn't hand out, yes, you can remove this tree to everybody who would request it. So it's possible that had they or should they have requested that, they may have got a no.
Yeah, through the chair, that's absolutely correct. There would be a justification required as to why you need to remove the tree. Is it dead? Is it, likely to, shed limbs or something along those lines that might be of risk, high risk to pedestrians and the like? Those types of factors would be factored into whether council would consent to the removal of a street tree. But I guess that wouldn't come through often.
Thank you.
And probably just as another example, I've certainly have seen council street trees removed on the basis that they're uprooting, either the curb or the footpath, and there's no other remedy but to remove the tree and repair the infrastructure. Are there any other questions of Laurie? No. So next, Laurie, you're up again on behalf of Headley Widow.
I object to the proposed redevelopment at 2 Cohen Avenue on 3 key grounds. The proposed redevelopment is inconsistent with the council's own policy regarding medium density housing. The only location available for the driveway presents a substantial safety threat to traffic, and the redevelopment is inconsistent with the council's stance on climate and environmental preservation. Development of medium density housing degrades an area already noted for having many features of a climate resistant natural environment. I would like to draw council's attention to the Nillumbik housing strategy, which is available from the council website, specifically clause 22.01, which deals with the medium density housing policy. This policy provides guidance on the location, design and siting of medium density housing. It directs such developments to sites within 400 metres of all of the following: a public transport scheduled stop, a public open space, community facilities and community centres, commercial centres. The policy notes that Eltham, Diamond Creek and Hurstbridge centres provide all of these. This proposed dwelling is located a 2.5 kilometre drive from the Eltham shops and railway station. The closest bus stop is a 700 metre walk away over a hill most pedestrians avoid. The proposed development only meets one of the 4 criteria mentioned for the location of medium density housing, and that is public open space. This development would set a precedent for medium density housing in an area where there is none, yet does not meet the Council's own directive on where medium density housing should be developed. The only location for the driveway of the proposed dwelling is approached from both directions by steep hills. Immediate traffic has limited visibility, yet approaches at speeds exceeding 60 k's an hour, as shown by a recent council survey. A pedestrian refuge was recently installed at this point of the road in recognition of the risk of fast-moving traffic to pedestrians. So the risk is well established. It is not a question of if there will be an accident, but when, caused by cars entering or departing the redeveloped property. The proposed subdivision and redevelopment has already resulted in the clearing of vegetation. The proposal has been prepared after the owner-developer had cleared most of this, which is an insincere basis to state that the proposal requires little vegetation clearance. Nillumbik Council has declared a climate emergency as recently as this year and released their climate action plan. Within the plan, Focus Area 3 is having a climate-resilient natural environment. It states Nillumbik Shire's green wedge and its vegetated urban environment present opportunities for deliberate action to act as a carbon sink to help sequester emissions and thus help to limit climate change, whilst at the same time helping to reduce urban heat island impacts, provide climate-resilient habitat and climate-resilient food systems. This proposal is in an area well established as having many features that are aligned with the Council Climate Action Plan, yet with few of the features Council has already laid down as being necessary for development of medium density housing. This would be a very poor look indeed for a climate conscious council.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone who submitted tonight. Certainly helped with Council's deliberations and consideration of the item, and we'll move straight to that. We've also in the officer report, do we have a mover?
I've got an alternate motion to put forward.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor. You can read your motion.
Thank you. I'll read it out. That the committee, acting under delegation from Council, issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit to the land located at 2 Cohen Avenue, Eltham, for the construction of a second dwelling, double storey, to the rear of the existing dwelling, 2 Cohen Avenue, Eltham, on the following grounds. 1, the proposal is inconsistent with the objectives of clause 1601-1L, location of medium density residential development of the Nillumbik planning scheme due to the site's distance from the Eltham Major Activity Centre. 2, the proposal is inconsistent with the objectives of clause 1501-5L, the neighbourhood character Nillumbik of Nillumbik planning scheme due to A, building bulk, massing and scale, and B, insufficient landscaping opportunities. And 3, the proposal does not meet the following objectives of clause 55 of the Nillumbik planning scheme, clause 5502-1, neighbourhood character, clause 5503-8, landscaping, and clause 5506-1, design detail, and 4, the proposal is an overdevelopment of the site.
Thank you, Mayor Eyre, as a ward councillor. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Duffy, back to you.
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy, and back to you, Mayor Eyre.
Thank you. Firstly, thanks to all the residents who contacted me and those who objected and then come tonight as well to speak. Where do I start to speak about this development? I guess I'd like to set the scene, building on what we've already heard from speakers tonight. 2 Cohen Avenue is on the corner of Leanne, well we call it Leanne, but it's really Lean Drive. Lean Drive is hilly, like many roads and streets in Eltham. There's a blind corner leading into Cohen Avenue from one side, and on the other is a hill leading down. Just slightly to the side of the front of the proposed development is a centre island. Its purpose is to slow traffic down. It also supports safe pedestrian access to the reserve and to along Valley Way, and up to the aqueduct and walking paths on either end. Most pedestrians crossing Lean Drive use this centre island to walk across the road safely, as it's in the dip of two hills and a blind corner. I'd also like to mention that the area is made up of single house dwellings. This development will change the feel and natural feel of the reserve next door. I asked a group of residents some time ago around what would they like to see in the reserve. Are they wanting more? Would they like to develop it in some way? And when I say develop, I don't mean put property on there. I mean, do they want park benches and paths? They said no, they wanted to stay the way it is with the dirt path leading through to allow to feel more natural and rustic. Those weren't necessarily the words, but that's what they were referring to. Also, there was a photo showing the sign, showing people crossing and alerting to the Pedestrian Refuge coming out of Cohen Avenue. Council is currently working on its neighbourhood character strategy, and we know how important this is to our community. And what was highlighted for me was through this consultation and working with officers is how important this is, and to keep the same characters. And if we were to look at the neighbourhood character objectives, it's to ensure that the design respects existing neighbourhood characters and contributes to preferred neighbourhood character. If we were to allow this development, we would be changing that neighbourhood character. Because hearing also from residents tonight that it doesn't fit the surrounding area. We're also looking at landscaping objectives and feel that there's limited capacity to do landscaping. As John Alexander mentioned this earlier on from Madison and Co. Tonight, that Leanne Drive and most of the supporting streets do not have unit-style buildings, so this would be quite out of place. It would be would and could set a precedent. And there is only one other block of apartments or units on Leanne Drive, and this was designed on a vacant plot to fit the land. We also heard that the nature strip tree was removed and not by council to allow for additional parking in Kerwood Avenue. So will this new development also require additional parking, and where will visitors park? We know that Leanne Drive is not a wide road, and as you drive through you need to drive to the centre of the road to pass parked cars. I'd also like to point out that we have a dedicated webpage on Council's website dedicated to infrastructure investigations covering rat running, increased traffic and speeding along Allendale Road, Ingrams Road, Margaret Street, Zigzag Road and Leanne Drive. So the area is already busy and officers are already dedicated to looking at the increased traffic, the rat running, the speeding. So this will only exacerbate that. I'd like councillors to consider what they've heard from residents and what sort of precedent this might set, and that we're currently looking at our neighbourhood character strategy, and this, whilst it hasn't been endorsed yet, this will change the character of the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Eyre. Councillor Duffy, as the second, you wish to speak?
Thank you. I'd like to say my extend gratitude to everyone that's come tonight to speak to us. It's a big thing to come out of your homes at night, and it is noted that for some of you this was the very first time that you've spoken to council. It can be daunting, so I'm grateful. Thank you. Also, John, thank you for coming and speaking on behalf of the applicants. People have the right to enjoy their home and to improve their property. So upon joining council, I made a commitment to protect our green wedge and to allow appropriate development and to give residents a real voice on planning matters. So that's what tonight's been about, a planning matter. People have the right to develop their land, people have a right to enjoy the land, and people have the right to be heard on what's happening in our community. The Mayor's mentioned the neighbourhood character study, and I think that's really important, and a lot of what we've heard today relates back to why neighbourhoods are important and the characters of our neighbourhoods and what people love about it. We heard from Joanne saying we like where we live. We heard from Emma that she moved to Cohen Avenue to celebrate the environment and to raise her family. We heard from Stephen about open space and the value of a large backyard. Libby talked about the preciousness of Cohen Avenue's lifestyle that celebrates family and backyards. Through Laurie, we heard the words of her husband, Hedley, reminding Council of the relevant points from our Climate Action Plan. All of these things are things to consider. There are many other factors that were discussed tonight, and there were lots of other objections that were put through as well. I note that there were 26, I believe, that were received. And just going through some of those comments, some of the same themes were recurrent, like protecting the wildlife that people enjoy in the area, children walking to school, and John Facondo talked about his evidence of wanting to see more of that. The traffic impacts, community concerns about a precedent being set for future development. I suppose one of the things that I'm looking at here is there was a call from one resident saying we don't want to live in an area with high density living. These are comments from people in their submissions other than those that have spoken tonight. One of the things that I've noticed in Edendale Ward is that there have been a number of subdivisions, and a number of those subdivisions have taken place with the clearing of blocks where all vegetation is removed before houses are completely knocked down. There are examples in Silver Street, in Bird Street, and Ryan's Road. There are examples of where blocks that have streets with front yards and backyards and single dwellings in the middle have had subdivision allowed, where there are now multiple buildings on those that are all completely new, and that does have a trigger effect where other properties in those streets are up for sale, and the same sort of thing is most likely to occur. So this is a very delicate spot to weave in looking at how do we have enough space for the people that want to live here, and how do we protect what the people love about this area. So I, again, would like to say that I've listened to what you've had to say, and I really would like to say that in making my decision here, I am supporting the Mayor in this alternate...
and thanks, that's time now, Councillor Duffy.
Alternate motion to refuse.
Thank you. I'll just clarify one thing that Councillor Duffy said about John Alexander being speaking on behalf of the applicant. John actually is the applicant. So the decision tonight, the notice of decision will go to John. It doesn't go to the owners of the property, it goes to John as the applicant. So John's... Beg your pardon? Well, you just said it wrong, but that's okay. But I just want to make that point, that John's the applicant. That's why I gave John the opportunity to speak. He wasn't speaking on behalf of the owners. He was speaking on behalf of himself, who's the applicant. So he's employed by the owners. So that's fine. Now I'll give the opportunity for anyone who wants to speak against the motion. Councillor Egan.
Thank you, Mayor. I've listened to what everybody said tonight too, and I'm struggling with some inconsistencies, and I'll go through them. If there are no trees in the backyard already, I can't see how the wildlife will be impacted except from the road issue, and I'll leave that to last because that's a separate issue. I also don't classify this as high density, it's another dwelling. And there were comments from some of the submitters and also some of the ones that we didn't hear tonight about having their children come and go. Well, if we don't start having some sort of increase in the number of houses, nobody will be able to afford to move into Nillumbik at all. The house right next door is actually a two-storied house, and when we're talking about taking up backyards, the paving and the pool of that one nearly takes up the whole backyard. There are also comments, and I'm not sure who by, that some of the, people have big backyards and this building will be right on the fence line. The house on the other side of Lean Drive Reserve is exactly on the fence line, as is number 8's really, really close as well in Cohen Avenue. Looking at the map, and I've looked at more than Google Maps, I've got about 3 maps up here, and I've driven past quite a number of times. That's on my way to school. It's about the smallest house I can see on the whole map that fits on my laptop. So to add another dwelling isn't going to overdevelop the site at all. The size of the front yard, from what I can see, is nearly as big as the existing house if you take away the gazebo bit at the back. Going out of Cohen Avenue into Lean Drive, there's nothing blocking that corner at all, so that's not a blind corner. I understand the issue about crossing the road where the refuge is, and I'm wondering, Yelmar's not on the call, but I wanted to ask him whether there's a possibility that wombat crossings could be put, not just there, but in other areas of Lean Drive where it's busy, like they have in Zigzag Road. I think everybody knows what I'm talking about, the big sort of, you drive, you know what I'm talking about, Fran. Yeah, it will still have quite a small footprint compared to some of the other houses, even just in Cohen Avenue, not to mention some of the ones when you just sort of go a little bit north and south. The other thing with the shadowing, it's actually on the west side of the house next door of their pool, so I struggle to see how it will shadow the pool in the morning. It's physically impossible because it's on the west side, so that's not going to happen.
The west is where the sun would come from.
Yeah, I know, but not till late in the afternoon. He said in the morning it's not going to come from there. The other thing is there's also already an existing crossover, and people coming out of that and turning left obviously aren't going to be going at 60 k's an hour. They're going to be going very slowly, and they're going to be right into the...
Thanks, Councillor Egan. Your time's up.
Yep, thank you. So I won't be supporting it. The only other thing is the cost to council, and officers recommended it. That was my main point that I forgot.
Okay, no worries. Thank you, Councillor Egan. Anyone wishing to speak in favour of the motion? Now, Councillor Payne.
Yes, I just wanted to support Mayor in the amended motion. Interestingly, if you type 2 Cohen Avenue into Google Maps, you will see the nature strip tree, and then if you press the button around the corner, it disappears. So the 2 photos were taken either side of when that tree was removed. I just wanted to say that while we need to respect our planning scheme and our planning team, sometimes we have to make decisions that are for the net benefit of the community. John has pointed out that times are changing. That's true, and while I understand the applicant has sought to make changes to deal with objections, I think in this case the sheer volume of objections brings us to ask the question, is this of benefit to the community? And if we think not, we should vote accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Anyone wishing to speak in favour of the motion? Oh, I mean against the motion, I'm sorry. No? Anyone else wishing to speak at all? I'll just make a couple of my points in terms of what I'm thinking here. If you read the officer's report, it indicates that it ticks most of the boxes in terms of the planning scheme. That, you know, in terms of the planning scheme, it's a fairly good application, and it's worthy of council support. And a lot of these applications get through because they're put together by, you know, good applicants, you know, like John, who understands the planning scheme, and they often get through. The difference here is the local community, the 25 objections, who have all lodged written objections to council, you know, councillors as your elected representatives, in this case led by your ward councillor, who's also the mayor, who has been lobbying us as well to support your residents' case. Now, I'm going to support the motion, and I think the decision as council will be to issue a notice of refusal, but that doesn't mean it's all over, you know. That means the applicant will probably take and we don't know, and it's not for John to tell us tonight unless he wants to, probably take this matter to VCAT, and it's heard again. It's like an appeal, and we go through it again. Councils now will try to defend council's case, which is the refusal, and John will be trying to get that decision overturned. Now that's a planning scheme, that's what happened. But, you know, I'll just acknowledge and thank the members of the community who have done the hard work to change council's mind, because if it had not have been called in by the ward councillor, of course it would have gone through, because the officer recommendation would have been the decision under delegation. So the difference is the fact that when I read the objections, this was not a petition. This was not just residents, you know, signing a petition or signing a form letter. The fact that you've all gone to a lot of trouble to you know, submit to council, I think that's made the difference. But in all honesty, I can't guarantee that it's not going to be overturned at VCAT. So you just need to be cognizant of that fact and prepared for it. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about the planning scheme, how it works. It's not ideal. We're talking about as the crow flies. We're talking about medium density. This is a medium density development because it's 2 or more buildings on one block. You know, we don't like the sound of it, but what's proposed is medium density. That's probably all I'm going to say. I'm going to support the motion. If no other councillor wishes to speak, I'll put the motion. Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I should have given you the right reply before I started rambling.
I'm just a bit confused. Are you supporting the original motion or the amended motion?
There's only one motion on the table. Councillor Mayor.
Thank you.
Councillor Eyre. Mayor Eyre.
Okay, all right. Just as a right of reply, yes, if trees are removed, you are discouraging wildlife, but if trees are put back in there, it will support the reserve, and the reserve needs all the support it can have in encouraging wildlife back. And so by removing tree by tree, the reserve suddenly becomes a struggle point for our wildlife. It was also mentioned around high density, and no, this is not, I think that if it's not, even if it's not classed as high density, this area does not have other development such as this. So if it did go through, it will feel like high density to the residents of the area. It would be great if we could get wombat crossings for Leanne Drive or something similar to slow down traffic, and I have been working very hard with officers to work on this, and that's where the dedicated page on the website came from. That was not there before I started hounding officers to get this on the agenda. And I just wanted to also clarify that the shadowing is in the afternoon, not in the morning of the swimming pool. I think that's an important point to note. But I think really we're looking at neighbourhood character here and the feel of it, and we want residents to feel, relaxed to come home and not feel like it's overcrowded with cars, and that it doesn't feel like an eyesore when you drive down the street. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Eyre. So I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And against? Yep, I've got... does someone want to call a division? No? Yeah, sure. All right, so... Yep, thanks. And we'll vote again on the division. So all those in favour? I've got Councillor Ramcharan, Councillor Eyre, Councillor Payne, Councillor Perkins, Councillor Stockman and Councillor Duffy. And against, we have Councillor Egan. So thank you, Gallery. We'll continue on with the meeting. Just run through. I don't think there is much else, but for the purposes of completeness, I just have to run through the agenda. If I had a paper copy, I'd be flicking. I'm now scrolling. Oh, there it is. So supplementary and urgent business, there's none. Confidential reports, there's none. So I declare the meeting closed. Thank you all for attending. And good night.